Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. It's great to be here. Great to be back. It's Old Homes Day. Hey, Larry, how you doing back there? We're both still bald, but bald is better. That's what Governor Brown tells me. So, hey, it's great to see everybody. And Senator Padilla, thank you for your kind introduction. Alex has been a very good friend for a long time and a wonderful leader here in California. So thank you for your leadership. There's Arturo over here. He is a force of nature. You look up the term force of nature in the dictionary, you'll see Arturo Vargas. So thank you so much. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge one of the icons of the civil rights movement to your right, Dolores Huerta. It's an honor to be here. You know, I'm kind of the wrong person to be talking about the 50th anniversary of the civil rights movement, in the sense that I feel like I'm a student of the movement. And when you are here in the presence of generalissimas of the movement and leaders of the movement, it truly is humbling. And so, Dolores, it's great to see you again, and thank you for everything you have done to expand opportunity for so many people across this nation. I also want to acknowledge, when you work at the Department of Justice, it's a real honor. I also want to acknowledge our former Attorney General, Alberto Gonzalez. It's an honor to be here with you as well, Mr. Attorney General. You know, there are many anniversaries. Kamala mentioned the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. But, you know, over the last year or so, there have been a number of remarkable anniversaries that we have noted that really give us pause, a time to reflect, renew, and redouble our efforts. We celebrated roughly a year ago the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail. We celebrated, or marked, really, the 50th anniversary of the 16th Street bombing. More recently, at the Department of Labor, we marked an anniversary that you might be a little bit less aware of. It was the 145th anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And the reason I note that one is because we have a Labor Hall of Fame. And to mark that anniversary, we inducted the Chinese American railroad workers into that Hall of Fame, because they are part of the all too frequently untold story of the civil rights struggle. And when there's the iconic photo in Utah where the Transcontinental Railroad was finally completed, notably absent in that photo were the railroad workers. And they actually had to go on strike for better wages. They had so many acts of courage, and it was so remarkable to be able to pay honor to them at the Department of Labor so recently. And it was so wonderful recently to go to the viewing of the movie about Cesar Chavez. Because for me, Cesar Chavez brings together the two passions of my professional life, labor rights and civil rights. They are inextricably intertwined. Cesar Chavez understood that the most important thing he could do for farm workers was to get the right of collective bargaining, to make sure that they could form a union and bargain together. And that's really what the president was talking about a year ago when we marked the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Because as you know, the March on Washington was a march for jobs, and it was a march for justice. It was a march on Washington for jobs and freedom. It was a march for civil rights, and it was a march for labor rights. There were posters there. The I Am a Man campaign. I've kind of taken a little liberty to say I am a person campaign. Because, you know, they were looking to increase the minimum wage, and they were looking to make sure that the right to vote existed. They were marching for civil rights, and they were marching for labor rights. They were marching to make sure that racial justice existed in this country, and they were marching to ensure that economic justice was ensured in this country. And there were so many titans who were involved in that, whether it was A. Philip Randolph, Cesar Chavez, so many other people who were so heavily involved. And as President Obama said last year, to mark that 50th anniversary, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I'd been in this job for about a month, and I remember those days. And he said, for the men and women who gathered 50 years ago were there not in search of some abstract ideal. They were there seeking jobs as well as justice, not just the absence of oppression, but the presence of economic opportunity. And the passage of the Civil Rights Act, less than a year later, was truly a historic triumph. And as somebody who has had the privilege of enforcing that law, I took it as a solemn obligation because I am acutely aware of the number of people who made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure passage of that law. And so, it's really time today to make sure that we note our progress, but also discuss the unfinished business. And indeed, tremendous progress has been made. And I think some of the best examples are, Kamala Harris as one of our speakers. Another example, Senator Padilla himself. It's a remarkable nation that allows the son of people living here in LA to go to MIT and to have the sky be the limit. That's what the Civil Rights Act was about. You look at the President of the United States, and one of the most remarkable days of my life, and I suspect your life, was Election Day 2008, where this nation made history. And I'm confident it won't be the last time we make history, because the civil rights struggle is a marathon relay. The baton is in our courts today. We have made, indeed, remarkable progress, but we have more work to do. And that unfinished business of America is the unfinished business that you do day in and day out. I had the good fortune of serving as a local elected official, as a state cabinet secretary, and now in 2 different positions in the federal government, at the Justice Department and now the Department of Labor. I have so much respect for the work that all of you who are in local government do, and all of you who are working in state government do, because the rubber hits the road in local government. I saw that firsthand. There's so much you can do to further the goals of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and all of the other civil rights laws and economic justice laws that were passed to ensure access to opportunity. And you are indeed doing it, because we're having a few challenges in Washington moving the legislative needle. But across this country, you have been incubators of innovation, pioneers of fairness and opportunity, and you continue to do that. And so I take my hat off to you, because you're doing so much and you have so many tools. I hope you will continue to use them, because you know what? We do have a lot of unfinished business. We have made so much progress in areas of education. One statistic that people don't know is that the Latino dropout rate over the last 10 years has declined 50%. That's a remarkable statistic that we can all point to as a matter of pride. And that is because there has been a concerted effort. We're all in this together. Local governments, local leaders, local businesses recognizing that this is an economic imperative, it's a moral imperative, it's a civil rights imperative. And you have been working hard, and we continue to work. And that is a 10-year effort under Republican and Democratic administrations. This is not a partisan issue. Reducing dropout rates, increasing graduation rates, increasing access to skills so that people can punch their ticket to the middle class. And so we need to continue that progress, because we also know that that is a wonderful statistic, but there are other statistics that aren't so good. When I was in the Civil Rights Division, I traveled the country, and I saw all too frequently that there were too many school districts that remain so many years after Brown separate and unequal. I saw the school-to-prison pipeline result for black and brown kids all too frequently. Access to opportunity being denied, and being denied really remarkably perversely. I did an event once in Meridian, Mississippi, with about 10 kids who were sitting up on a dais just like me, and you were sitting right down there. And I could see under the table there's footwear, and what they all had in common was that they had an ankle bracelet on. These were kids 13 and 14 who are already in the system. And I asked them, what did you do? Well, one person had the wrong colored tie. One person had the wrong colored socks. One person spoke out. One person was guilty of flatulence. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this stuff up. And that got them into the school to prison pipeline. That is not who we are as a nation. We need to be smarter than that. And that is why so many people see access to opportunity remaining elusive. Access to equal housing opportunity for all too many people remains elusive. The corrosive power of fine print all too frequently during the housing bubble transferred and transformed the American dream of home ownership into the American nightmare. At my last year at the Department of Justice, we ended up recovering on behalf of victims of lending discrimination, primarily Latinos and African Americans, more money than in the previous 25 years combined, because we saw this problem across the nation and we worked for people. And I will tell you, here is a sad reality, and it's a reality we must acknowledge. Much of the challenge were Latinos abusing Latinos and African Americans abusing African Americans. Se habla español would be the sign at the storefront, and people would be brought in, and they would be lured to trust, and then that trust would be abused. And that was part of the story of the meltdown and the lending discrimination that we had to look at. We're turning a corner, but all too many people lost their wealth. We see so many challenges persistent in our world of policing. I spent way too much time in my last job in Maricopa County. That was not smart policing that I observed out there in Maricopa County. You know, there's often that false choice. We either keep our communities safe or we safeguard the Constitution. I categorically reject that false choice. We can have safe policing and constitutional policing. And in fact, they go hand in hand. The consent decree we did just up the road in Los Angeles was great proof of that you can do safe, effective, and constitutional policing and reduce crime at the same time and promote public confidence in law enforcement. We continue to have these challenges across America, part of the unfinished business. We continue to have challenges in the voting context. Next year is the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday and the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And what we continue to see here today are all too many ill-advised efforts to restrict as opposed to expand the right to voting. You know, I was amused. I thought one of the most remarkable comments and quotes on some of the efforts at these voter ID laws was from Colin Powell. General Powell, in connection with the North Carolina effort, asked the following question: how can this phenomenon of voter fraud be so widespread and at the same time so undetected? And when we did our case in Texas, the record demonstrated over a 10-year period, I needed one hand to count the documented incidents of alleged voter fraud. And when I went to that one hand, actually, it ended up being at most one thumb that I needed to document the so-called voter fraud for which this was the solution. Voting is our most sacred right, and we should be working to expand the rights of eligible voters to vote. And you've been working on that. That's never been a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. And that's why people like Colin Powell and John Lewis speak up about these issues. And so we continue to move to make progress, but we have a lot of unfinished business. We have a lot of unfinished business in the area of economic justice as well. And it starts with the minimum wage. Nobody who works a full-time job in this country should have to live in poverty. And what we see all too frequently are people working hard and falling further behind. People who have to make choices between, do I pay the mortgage, do I pay the rent, or do I pay for my daughter's medicine? Those are choices that we should never have to make here in America. I applaud the San Diego City Council. I applaud other local councils who are tackling this issue. 13 states in the last year have raised the minimum wage. Business owners across this country tell me, Tom, this is a consumption-deprived economy or recovery. I need more customers. And the way to get more customers is to put more money in their pockets. That's why we need to raise the minimum wage. And if we want to expand opportunity for everyone, we need to get back to immigration reform, as Alex correctly pointed out. I haven't given up. This president will never give up, because this is an economic imperative, a moral imperative, a public safety imperative, and we're continuing to move forward on this because so many people depend on this. I talk to folks in the Silicon Valley, and they tell me the most important issue for us in Washington is immigration reform. The second most important issue is immigration reform. I talk to people in the religious communities who tell me the most important issue for us is immigration reform. It's always been, like the minimum wage, a bipartisan issue. And so we need to continue our work in these efforts because there is so much unfinished business. I couldn't help but note a story I read from Leader Boehner saying he was going to sue the president for, in his terms, the unlawful exercise of executive authority. Well, the president wouldn't exercise executive authority if Congress would just vote and pass some damn laws. That's what needs to happen here. And I will tell you, on immigration reform, on the minimum wage, on extending unemployment compensation for long-term unemployed, on infrastructure. Every single one of these issues until now has been a bipartisan issue. It was Dwight Eisenhower who built the interstate highway system. We can't eat cake and lose weight. If we're going to repair our roads and bridges, I know we want to eat cake and lose weight. I'm all for that. And whoever invents that, and if it's going to be invented, it'll be invented in California. But we need this. They're expanding the Panama Canal. There are opportunities that abound here in this country, and we need to be ready for them. And so I hope that we can rekindle that spirit of collaboration and cooperation. And that really brings me to what my final point is, which is that your role in building an opportunity society is so critically important. Because, change doesn't initiate in Washington. Change comes to Washington. I think about so many of the important issues of our day, and I see how they started in states and then came to the federal government. The Affordable Care Act was a product of learning from the Massachusetts experience. And look where we are now as a nation. So many more people, including but not limited to Latinos, finally, for the first time in their lives, have access to health security. And that was the result of experimentation at a state level. And we're seeing the fruits of the Affordable Care Act. And by the way, we see opponents talking less and less about the Affordable Care Act because it's more and more successful. And I applaud Governor Brown. And I would note the conversations I've had with Chamber of Commerce people in Texas and Florida who can't understand why they have not expanded Medicaid, because you're leaving billions of dollars on the table, not to mention the fact that those are the uninsured capitals of the United States. But that is where you are leading. You're leading on the minimum wage. 13 states in the last year have enacted increases in the minimum wage. Mayors and other county executives doing the same. You look at the issue of paid leave and workplace flexibility, and you see leadership at state and local levels across this country. You look at leadership in the civil rights context, and I implore you to continue at a state and local level to enact these laws, because what we need is what I call redundancy in law enforcement. If we're going to protect people against discrimination, we need federal laws, we need state laws, and we need local laws, because laws are only as good as the political will of the people enforcing them. And at any one given time, the will to enforce may not be there at one level. And that is why, you need to continue those efforts to put in place those protections at a state and a local level, because you really are those drum majors for justice. I firmly believe, and I leave you with this, that the moral arc of our nation and our universe bends toward those who seek to expand opportunity, not those who seek to restrict opportunity. Those who sought to expand access to health care in the 1960s, they were right when we passed Medicare. And there was a cacophony of people who said Medicare would lead to socialized medicine. Those who opposed the Civil Rights Act were on the wrong side of history. Those who opposed the Voting Rights Act and expanding opportunity were on the wrong side of history. Those who oppose, I believe, the Affordable Care Act will be proven to be on the wrong side of history. Those who are expanding voting rights, are expanding opportunity, you are on the right side of history. There's that where were you, mama, and where were you, daddy moments that I think about a lot when we're debating these issues. I want to be able to look my son and grandson and granddaughter and all my nieces and nephews in the eye when we're talking about these most challenging issues of our time. And I want to be able to say that I was on the side of Dolores Huerta. I was on the side of Cesar Chavez. I was on the side of John Lewis. I was on the side of the Chinese railroad workers. I was on the side of wage fairness. I was on the side of expanding opportunity. That's who we are as a nation. And in your positions, that's what you're doing day in and day out. Keep up the great work. Keep the pressure on Washington. We can move this nation forward. I come to you with an unrelenting sense of optimism because you know what? We've tackled more serious challenges before in our nation's history, and we defeated them. We moved this nation forward. We're going to do it again now because there's a lot of human capital talent in this room and across this country. And with your leadership, we will indeed continue to build a more perfect union for everyone. Thank you so much for having me.